All right. Thank you for joining us today. Very excited to see a lot of attendees from all over the world. My name is Dylan Barrell. I'm Chief Product and Technology Officer at DQ. Have been doing accessibility for about 15 years now. You probably know Xcore, which is my baby. But my passion, which I suppose drove Xcore, is how we can use automation to make accessibility as efficient as possible. And so I'm very excited to talk about one of those things today. Glenda, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. I'm Glenda, the Good Witch of Accessibility Sims. I'm the Chief Information Accessibility Officer here at DeQ, and I've been doing this digital accessibility thing since the late 90s. And I couldn't be more excited about what's happening and what's being presented today.
Johnny come lately. All right. So first of all, what is Model Context Protocol? Some of you probably, if you go back about 6 months, had never even heard of this. I know we did talk about this at AXCON. I was very excited about this back then, and it seems as though all of that hype is really coming to fruition. But what Model Context Protocol is really a protocol, which is a way for applications to talk to each other. And what's unique about this is a very simple protocol, but what's unique about it is that it's built into most of your LLM based chat or agent technology. So for many of you who've been using, say, ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude or something like that, whenever you ask it to go and search the web, what it's doing is it's accessing sort of a search tool. And most of the time these days, in the beginning it wasn't always this way, but most of the time these days, when it does that, it's using the Model Context Protocol to do that. And the really powerful thing about this is it opens up the power of the understanding of human language and human knowledge that LLMs have. It opens it up to be able to use tools that can do things either in a more consistent way than the LLMs themselves can do it, which is important in our case for accessibility, but sometimes just to allow it to be able to do things that the LLM cannot do. So search the web to find information that is newer than the information that it was trained on is one example of that. Other examples are interacting with applications. So saving maybe your Salesforce application to go and get customer data, or maybe your Jira application to go and get data from that. And so the power of this is that it opens up the ability for these very powerful LLM-based systems to be combined with other applications and other data to achieve things which really otherwise couldn't be achieved. And analysts are predicting that by 2027, 65% of enterprise automation is going to run through MCP, the MCP protocol, which is amazing. Over to Glenda.
Thank you. So, what does this mean? Honestly, for decades, we've been trying to make digital accessibility a reality. And while we've made some progress, it's nowhere near enough. The truth is that the pace at which digital interfaces are being created has long outstripped our human ability to coach inclusive design and test for accessibility at scale. But now something is really, really shifting. With Model Context Protocol, MCP, we are unlocking a fundamental change. Why is this a big deal for our industry? Because MCP is really going to let developers create accessible code from the start. Better yet, MCP will help designers create truly inclusive experiences with confidence. Accessibility will no longer be a bottleneck or a handoff or an afterthought. With MCP, accessibility becomes a natural part of design and development, and that's where the magic begins. Suddenly, accessibility experts will no longer be stuck chasing thousands of predictable issues. Instead, we're going to be free to focus precious human brain power on deep strategic work, designing for emerging technologies, shaping accessible AI, and building proactive, sustainable accessibility strategies. Move to the next slide, Dylan.
Sure thing, Glenda.
Thanks. Y'all, this is really personal for me. When I think about what's possible, when I imagine a future where digital equality is not the exception, but the norm, it brings tears of joy to my eyes. I truly believe we are stepping into something extraordinary. And for the giants that went before us, like my mentors, Jim Thatcher and John Slayton, we're going to get to honor them by making their dreams of accessibility come true. If we as an industry use agentic AI ethically and responsibly, keeping humans in the loop for judgment, nuance, and oversight, we will win this battle. Within the next 3 to 5 years, I predict we will see a seismic shift. Sustainable digital accessibility will become the norm, not just the goal. MCP isn't just a technical breakthrough, y'all. It's a launch pad. It marks the moment we stop fighting accessibility issue by issue and start designing systems that are born accessible. It's the shift that lets developers build inclusively by default while freeing up accessibility experts to tackle the future of AI, immersive tech, voice, wearables, and whatever comes next. MCP accelerates everything. This is how we win, not by burning out trying to catch every last bug by hand, but by changing the game entirely. Because when we combine the power and precision of AI with the brilliance of human insight and heart, we won't just keep up, we will leap ahead. That's the impact of MCP. And it's not just a big deal for our industry, it's the beginning of a new era for digital equality. So, Dylan, show us the magic.
Yeah, Glenda, that you've nailed it on the head. That's exactly why we're building the Axe MCP server, is to really leverage that. Um, so what is the Axe MCP server? It really, what it does is it connects the Axe platform to your agents. And because it connects them to your agents, it also connects them to all your other enterprise systems or systems that support MCP. So it makes things possible that really weren't possible before. So we're launching this first with the Axe DevTools extension and with an Axe Assistant-driven remediation tool built in. And this gives developers not only the high quality, consistent ability to detect issues while they're coding or while they're testing, but it also gives them high quality, reliable, consistent ways to fix those. It's able to do that right where they're coding, whether that's inside their IDE, if they're using an agent that's integrated into the IDE, or whether they're using a command line agent, or whether they're using an agent embedded into one of those online platforms. Wherever they're doing that, they can leverage this capabilities. So the benefits are, equipping agents and developers to build accessible code from the start. Accelerating the remediation with much more accurate results and fixing coverage, fixing suggestions, and to be able to catch and fix accessibility issues while you're coding without leaving the development environment. But as Glenda pointed out, the key is leaving the developer or the user at the center of that, able to make the decisions themselves. So what does this really look like? I mean, the Axe platform really consists of broadly two things. The one is our high quality knowledge. Deak University has the best accessibility training content and a lot of other content on best practices, good and bad examples of how to code things. All of the Axe core issue remediation pages, and that is all on Deak University, and that's all available to our Axe Assistant. And the other thing that the Axe platform has is the best-in-class ability to do testing that goes way beyond what the open source can do. And these are now enabled through MCP to be embedded into that agent and then leveraged either directly by the human or by the human together with their agent. And this really opens up these new capabilities that I've been talking about. So that's enough talking. let's actually show you what this looks like. So I'm going to stop my presentation here, and I'm going to switch to my IDE. Just give me a second. Yeah, I think you can probably still see the.
Presentation. Mhm.
Okay, I got to change my. This is what I'm sharing. Just give me a second. I'm going to switch to show my desktop. And now you should be seeing VS Code. Okay, so what I have here is awesome. Thank you. What I have here is VS Code running. I have my local development environment running in my console, in my terminal over here. On the left-hand side, I have my code. This is the code for the world famous recipes dashboard application, which we tend to demo with. And on the right over here, I have Copilot in agent mode. So when Copilot's in agent mode, it can do things in a sort of more independent fashion, and it can pull in all those tools that it's got configured via MCP. For this project, what I've got in my MCP setup over here is I've got two MCP servers, but the important one is really this Axe DevTools MCP server that I got set up here, which gives us access to all those cool functionality that I was talking about earlier. But I've also set up some Copilot instructions. And this is because my experience, or I suppose our experience at DQ working with AI agents is you got to give them more information, more high quality information you give them, the more sort of precise the instructions that you give them and the smaller the tasks that you give them, the more likely they are to produce really good outcomes and really save you time, right? So the instructions I've given it here are just things that I try to be guardrails for what I don't want it to do and what I do want it to do. So I'm telling it, when you do accessibility testing, please use the MCP server. When you make changes to the code, please change one page at a time. And that's just to stop the AI agent from sort of going off and getting confused by trying to do too many things all at one time. And because we have an accessible component library in this application, I'm telling it not to try to fix issues in the component library, because what the agent will sometimes try to do is wrap those in new React components and try to hack them to fix accessibility issues. I'm saying, please just leave my accessible component library alone and ignore those issues. Okay, so what I've prepared for us here is a very quick prompt, because I'm terrible at typing when I have hundreds of people watching me. So I'm going to say, analyze the HTTP localhost colon 3033 page for accessibility, which is my dashboard page. Then find the code and fix any issues found. So it's always a little bit of a box of chocolates when you're working with an AI agent, because you never know what it's going to try to do. So the first thing it's doing is to see whether the development server is running. It didn't do this last time, but we're going to let it do that. Great, it's just validated what I told it in the first place, that the development server is in fact running. And now what it's doing is asking for permission to run the MCP server to do an analyze. So the way I've got this set up right now is you can give the MCP server permission to run the MCP server all the time and not ask for permission. But I want you to see every time that it does an analyze command, I want you to see it doing that. So I'm going to say, yes, please go ahead and analyze that application. And then it's going to normally, yep, here it is. It's going to summarize all the issues that it found. So it found 3 different types of issues. It found color contrast issues. It found images without alt attributes and links without accessible name. And now what it's doing is leveraging the capability of the AI agent itself to go and find that code. So, normally there's a couple of things which take time when you're trying to fix accessibility issues. First of all, the testing, and we've automated that to a large degree and made that relatively easy. The second thing is sort of finding the code that's responsible for that, and this is really where the AI agent is being leveraged, is to find that code. And then the third thing is figuring out what's the best way to fix this, and that's where we're combining the capability of the Axe Assistant with the AI agent to really suggest the best sort of remediation. So you'll notice that it's found some and changed the CSS. So this is to fix the color contrast issues. What it's done is it's chosen a slightly darker blue in order to get a better contrast with the white text. So that's the first change it's suggesting. Now I can either accept that change, or I can reject that change, or I can modify the change that it's suggesting to something that I think is more appropriate. The second thing it's done is it's fixed the missing alt on this image. Because it has access to the code, it's realized, you know what, there is actually something in the code that I can just use for this. So I'm going to take the recipe name and I'm going to apply that to the alt with the word recipe after that. Now, of course, I could say, well, maybe that recipe is too much. I want to delete that, or I can just accept it as it is. And then the third thing it's done is it's found some icon links in the footer of the page. And because it's realized that that is an icon link without an accessible name, it's suggested a technique of using the ARIA label to add an accessible name, which won't impact the layout or the CSS of that particular piece of code. So it's applied ARIA label, and this is something the agent is doing itself, is actually picking the alt attribute from the URL. And so it's suggesting GitHub and LinkedIn as the alt, as the accessible names rather for these links. And I can, of course, go in and edit that myself. And so now it's made all these changes. And while I was talking, it was sitting there patiently waiting for me to give it permission to go and validate the changes. So I'm going to allow it to do that. And so now it's analyzing that page again, and it's saying, great, the accessibility issues have been fixed. Here's a summary of what I fixed. And it's going on and asking me for what it should do next. And, so now I could move on to the next page. I could move on to my contact us page, or whatever other part of the application I wanted to test and to fix. But what this is really showing you is the power of how we combine the high quality testing, high quality knowledge that's embedded into the X platform with this ability to understand. And as you see it suggesting accessible names here, that's one of the powers, the great powers of LLM systems, is the ability to actually in latent space map different types of information and actual meaning to other forms of that same information, and it really can help to make it easy to make things accessible and fix things in this way. And with that, I'm gonna pass it back to my. I think I can just switch to my presentation. All right. So this is just a little summary of what I showed you. There's a few simple steps to make your code more accessible. Is you give your agent an accessibility task, a prompt to tell it what you want it to do. Because of the way that our MCP server is set up, the agent will identify that the MCP server can be used to help it solve that problem, and it's going to go and ask the MCP server to do the appropriate thing. In this case, it asked to analyze, and then it asks for suggestions on how to fix those things. The AI agent then uses that information to suggest the code change in your IDE, and then the developer can decide to accept, edit, or reject that. So it's a really simple process that leverages the power of all the automation and puts the developer in control. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Laura to see if there's any questions in the chat.
Awesome. Yes, there are lots of great questions. I think the primary one that we need to answer right away is, how do people get this thing, and when will it be available for them to have access to it? And will there be any sort of trial available as well?
So yeah, the best way to get early access to this is to sign up in the link that Laura will be sharing with you when she shares this recording. We're actively looking for organizations that are, and people that are actively doing a lot of AI-based development, because while we think that we've done the right thing here, we really are not sure how this is really going to fit into the way that organizations are using AI agents. So yeah, please sign up if you are one of those people or one of those organizations that is actively pursuing this and looking into this. I think we're all trying to learn how these sorts of technologies are in fact going to change our workflows. And so we'd really like to be able to learn together with you how we can make these solutions perfect and the best solutions for those new emerging workflows. As to when this will be available, we anticipate it's going to be months from now, not that much longer. We have this internally available to DQ, and very soon we will be making it available to select customers too.
Okay, Great, thanks, Dylan. A lot of people are asking about the types of MCP clients that this will work with. I think I saw a question about Playwright, MPX, or as well. Do you have an or are there various IDEs such as VS Code and Windsurf Cursor? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, actually, it works with any client that uses that supports MCP. So we've tested it with Cursor, we've tested it with Claude Code, we've tested it with VS Code, with Copilot. I think there's some developers that have tested it with Windsurf. So we've tested it with a bunch of those, but in theory, it should be usable by any of those applications. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we actually embed a full browser into our MCP server itself, so it has access to everything that it needs to do the testing. And one of the things we're really interested in working with people on is to figure out how we can then combine that with the way that they are using other MCP servers, whether those are MCP servers that, for example, pull in information about their component library, or whether it's other capabilities to do testing. That's the sort of thing we really want to learn from customers. So please contact us. Actually, I must correct this. There are some customers that we have given access to this to, but it's a limited customer availability right now.
Thanks, Dylan. And then there's a couple of questions related to do these capabilities extend to native mobile?
Right now, they do not, but we have a long list of things that we want to be able to do through this, including test native mobile, including give you access through MCP to some of the other parts of the Axe platform, like the Axe reporting stuff, like the monitoring stuff, etc. So if there's particular use cases that you have in mind that you'd like us to support, that's also feedback we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, great. This is an interesting question. Can you share any details on how data is exchanged and stored once you've given analysis permissions with an interest in user privacy and IP protections?
Yeah, so it's no different than if you were using the Axe DevTools extension. In fact, we actually are using the Axe DevTools extension under the hood. And so it's no different from if you were using the Axe DevTools extension and the Axe Assistant product. So we have detailed information on our website about how we process that sort of information. And so please take a look at that and contact us, through one of our channels if you have any more detailed questions about that. But what I can say is that we aren't using any of the information that goes through this to train or anything like that. So unless you've given us permission to do that, all your information should be handled the way we talk about in our privacy and data policies.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. And then is the agent able to access the variables and tokens in a design system? For instance, to choose a darker color within the design system defined palette.
Very good question. Actually, that is not a part of the MCP server itself, but that is something that you would configure your coding agent to do. And in fact, that is one of the things that we are seeing a lot of our early access customers doing is setting up their own MCP servers to give them access to their design system. So, for example, Figma has an MCP server that allows you to access your Figma designs. And so that's exactly one of the sort of cool ways that you can combine our MCP server and our capabilities with the capabilities of other systems and in effect your own internal developments to really achieve what you need to achieve for your organization. So it's really our MCP doesn't make that possible, but MCP in general, together with your AI coding agent, makes that possible.
Awesome, thank you. And then one other question. For the many enterprises that utilize their own complex custom component, is there an optimistic future for these agents to be able to learn about them enough to give real-time IDE advice for them as well without manual mapping?
Yes, I do think so. I do think that that is possible, but once again, that's more of a configuration for the AI agent itself. And you know, once again, some of our more advanced customers are in fact using MCP to do that. Some of them are creating their own chatbots. One of the use cases we have is instead of using our Axe assistant for remediation, is companies are creating their own chatbots to do that, and we are licensing our content to them so that they can embed that content into their chatbots. And then in that scenario, we have the ability to turn off our own remediation tool, and then those customers can use their remediation tool to do that. So this is one of those areas. Once again, we're very interested, and we're actively talking to our customers and trying to define the best way the best way to do this. But that is one of the things that we are seeing a lot of companies do.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. This person is asking, is the MCP server catching all the issues from that automated testing can catch, but it is also checking the issues of guided tests as well?
Right. So right now, the very first release of this is not doing the guided testing or the advanced rules, but that is going to be very soon on the roadmap is to be able to enable that. So at the end of the day, what we want our MCP capability to do is to give you access to everything that the Axe platform can do. And that's going to take multiple releases for us to get to that point, but that's where we're going.
So thank you again, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.